Welcome to Around the World. I'm Suzanne Malveaux.
And I'm Michael Holmes. We'd like to welcome our viewers, not just here in the United States, but indeed all around the world.
It was just less than 24 hours ago that runners were crossing the finish line at the Boston Marathon when back-to-back explosions turned an end zone into what really looked like a war zone.
It really did. President Obama just called the bombings an act of terror.
This was a heinous and cowardly act. And given what we now know about what took place, the FBI is investigating it as an act of terrorism. Anytime bombs are used to target innocent civilians, it is an act of terror.
And we are getting new details about this horrific attack in CNN's continuing live coverage of the bombings at the world's oldest annual marathon. Here's what we know at the moment. The number of people killed stands at 3. That includes an 8-year-old boy.
Police have just raised the number of people wounded. They now say 176 people were hurt in the blast. At least 17 of them are now in critical condition, but still no arrests, and no group has claimed responsibility for the attack.
The FBI leading the investigation. Authorities say they are following several leads. You're looking here at live pictures. Well, I think we've got some live pictures. There they are of the crime scene. Our cameras overlooking Copley Square in Boston.
A 12-block section of the area, it's closed off while investigators are combing through every inch. They are simply searching for clues, anything to bring attention to this. We've got an update on the investigation. This news conference had happened just a short time ago. You see Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick dispelling early reports about what was a worry for many people, and that was unexploded devices.
It's important to clarify that 2 and only 2 explosive devices were found yesterday. Other parcels, all other parcels in the area of the blast have been examined, but there are no unexploded bombs.
We also heard from the special agent in charge of the FBI's field office about the wide reach of this investigation. Have a listen.
Our investigation certainly will not be confined, very likely, to the city limits of Boston. It would extend out to the eastern Massachusetts area. This will be a worldwide investigation. We will go where the evidence and the leads take us. We will go to the ends of the earth to identify the subject or subjects who are responsible for this despicable crime, and we will do everything we can to bring them to justice.
It's heartbreaking here. Among the many tragedies in this story, we're talking about a family that was impacted here. You have this 8-year-old, one of 3 people who was killed in the explosions. Martin Richard attended the marathon to simply watch his dad run, right? When his mom and his 6-year-old sister were also seriously hurt in the blast. His sister lost a leg. The mother had surgery for a brain injury.
Yeah, both still very ill. One witness says he thinks he saw that little boy just after the explosion.
When you're in such shock, you don't know really what you're seeing, and I thought I saw a child laying to the left, and my wife didn't see that, as she later told me, and I thought perhaps it was clothing or perhaps it was someone's limb, because there was a man there missing a limb, but it was surreal, and it was whoever did it was just the embodiment of evil. It's unbelievable.
And you said the bombs were on the ground rather than being...
There's no question those bombs were in knapsacks or something on the ground, because the woman whose clothing were melting into her skin, it was on her legs. The man lost a leg. Now, if that was the child was small, we would have been hit 50 feet away across the street if the bombs were higher. The bomb to the right, 75 yards away, nobody really knew what it was, and it was everybody kind of kept going on for a few seconds. But the one in front of us at Starbucks, when that happened, there was no doubt within a second everybody was running and screaming.
What was going through your mind in that moment?
We didn't know how many bombs there were. I thought that perhaps there were more bombs because there had been 2, and I was afraid there might be some on our side, and I wanted to get my wife out of there. She wanted to get down into the street because Timothy, our son, was due, as we thought, to cross at that time, and we didn't know if there were other bombs up the street. We finally got hold of them 2 hours later. But, you know, we were so excited to be here to the marathon to see our son run, and it's a war zone.
Is there anything that sort of surprised you? You said you were so shocked, you kind of had a different reaction than you might suspect you would in a situation like this.
I didn't think that I would be calm, and I wasn't calm. I was just in complete shock. When you see bodies around you and limbs, you think in advance that you're going to be just, you'll melt down, but you're really you're trying to move people out of there. And I tried to get my wife out of there, but I suppose to her credit, she immediately wanted to go down into the street. But you're caught in a dilemma, because it's terrorism. You're wondering if there's a third bomb to take out first responders and people that are helping. But this was designed to maim and kill, and it did.
And Gary Tuckman joins us now from Boston's Dorchester neighbourhood, home to the little boy who died in the blast. And Gary, I understand the boy's father is something of a community leader. Do we know much about that and how he's coping with all of this?
Well, it's unimaginable how a man copes with this, who loses his son, whose wife and whose daughter are in the hospital seriously hurt, and he's home with his other son. I don't know how you cope. Also, when we cover these stories, emotionally very difficult to cover, from Oklahoma City to 9/11, it never gets easier. But when we deal with the deaths of children, it's very difficult. And that's what we're facing here today. This house right behind me, you can see it, the gray house, that's where 8-year-old Martin Richard lived. Undoubtedly, he was a proud son when he went with his mother, his brother, and his sister about 6 miles to the north to see their father run in the Boston Marathon. It's a wonderful day. I remember doing that myself, rollerblading in a marathon, and my 8-year-old daughter years ago met me there, and she was proud, and I was proud, and it was just a wonderful day for everybody. Now you're facing a situation where this father understandably hasn't talked publicly, but we're trying to learn more about this family. Something amazingly poignant. The Boston Globe last year printed a picture. There was a peace walk taking place with local grade school students. Back then, little Martin, who was in 3rd grade now, was in 2nd grade back then. We want to show you this picture. During this peace walk in Boston to promote peace in the neighborhoods, he's holding a sign. It says, "No more hurting people, peace." And there are 2 hearts and a peace sign. That is the little boy who perished from this terrorist attack. We talked to, a short time ago, the neighbor who lives in the house right next to the gray house, very nice lady who's known all 3 of the children since they were babies, and she told us last night she saw the father.
I saw him get out of the passenger seat, and he looked like he was in a state of shock, and I said, "Bill," he didn't answer me. He just walked very slowly into the house, so his friend came over, and I said, "Is everything okay?" He said, "No. Martin was the little boy that was killed." And I was speechless, and I think he probably said something about Denise and the little girl, but I was really...
His wife and daughter.
Right, and I was in such a state of shock, I didn't even hear what he said. I started to cry, and I said, "If there's anything I can do, please just let him know I am here, and please send him my deepest sympathy."
Neighbors here want to do something for this family. They just don't know what they could do yet. This is not something you ever expect will happen in your neighborhood. Neighbors, friends, family, classmates have been coming to the house today, laying flowers in front, and also on the sidewalk right in front of this house, somebody wrote the word peace, the same word that this little boy put in his picture that he held up a year ago for the newspaper. Michael, Suzanne.
Just inconceivable. Gary, thanks so much. Gary Tuckman there.
You know, Gary is there in the neighborhood. I used to cover Boston, the Dorchester area, and people it's such a close community, a close-knit community. I mean, I can only imagine outside of that home what the neighbors are also feeling as well. Really, such a tragic situation.
What the right thing to do is to comfort somebody in that situation. It just defies belief.
And, of course, you know, we're talking about the chaos and the carnage, but we're also recognizing the people who came to the aid of victims, really the heroes in all of this. We're talking about those first responders. Here's how one of the runners put it.
The first responders were great. I don't know, you see on the video now all these guys jumping over fences trying to help out. People activated immediately, whether they were volunteers or the Boston police.
Dozens of people are fighting for their lives right now. Among the 176 people treated for injuries, 17 are now in critical condition.
Yeah, that number just grew and grew. 41 are in a serious condition. Dr. Sanjay Gupta joins us now from Boston. Sanjay, one of the most horrible aspects of this story is the number of people who lost limbs in this explosion. The two brothers, in fact, each lost a leg. You know, obviously this is a top-rate hospital, a trauma hospital and the like, but these were like battlefield injuries, weren't they?
I think that's the probably best way to describe it, Michael. And, you know, you and I have both seen these types of injuries. I was talking to the head of surgery here at Brigham and Women's, and he said that that's exactly how he described it. In fact, he used the description IED to sort of explain what these were like. A couple points. You know, there's been a lot of question whether or not there was, in fact, things within the bombs, such as BB-like things or nails, and the doctors now confirmed that they were. The question before was it something that was just blown in from the surrounding area, or was it within the explosive device itself? It was within the explosive device. This is a big level 1 trauma center. As you mentioned, within 15 minutes, the first wave of patients started to come here, to give you an idea of the speed. And by 60 minutes, that proverbial golden hour, all of the patients that they were going to take here did arrive. They performed lots of operations, these amputations like you mentioned, but also a patient with a severe head injury. Someone had a piece of shrapnel, one of these pieces of shrapnel that we're describing, that actually pierced one of the arteries in the neck, the carotid artery, which is obviously a very severe injury as well. 5 patients remain in critical condition here. So they move fast. They're still working very hard, Michael and Suzanne.
And Sanjay, tell us a little about, I mean, just the extent of the injuries here. There are so many people who were impacted by this, and the numbers just kept going up dramatically hour by hour. Why is that? Why did it unfold that way? Were people able to finally get to the hospitals, or was there something that delayed the process in getting them there?
Yeah, you know, you have a sort of first wave of patients usually within the first hour or two. And as you might imagine, those are the patients who have the worst injuries. These are patients who may have been seen at the scene of the race and then immediately taken by ambulance and brought here. But, you know, remember, when you have an explosion like this, there can be delayed injuries as well. It's almost a concussive blast between these two buildings. So people may have actually had concussive-type symptoms. They may have come to the hospital later on, ruptured eardrums. You can rupture some of the intestines inside your abdominal cavity without having any lacerations. You may not know it and come later on to the hospital. Also, some patients who were serious, they became more unstable overnight, became critical, and some who were critical became more stable. So this is going to be a very fluctuating and fluid situation for some time.
And Sanjay, is it your opinion as well that it could have been worse, that you could have had more people who lost their lives because of this?
Yeah, you know, I think there's no question, and if you watch some of the tape again, you know, you see people who are pretty close to the blast, what seems to be the origin of the blast, who were able to run out of there, and there are people who are a little further away who seem to be injured. So it seemed like this blast, as the doctor described it to me, really did stay along the ground for a period of time and then started to come up. So it was those leg injuries initially, awful injuries, Suzanne, to be clear, but those patients are most likely to survive. But then the pressure wave started to go up, and that's why you had the neck injury that I was describing, the head injury that I was describing. Those patients were a little further away.
All right, Sanjay, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We know that the tragedy in Boston really being felt throughout the world.
Oh, it is all around the world. Runners from 100 countries were represented in this race. It's one of the most international marathons in the world, and news organisations around the world, well, they're covering the attacks extensively.
Our international correspondents have a quick look at some of the reactions from around the globe.
Here in Hong Kong and across China, the Boston Marathon blasts have been widely reported. They were reported almost in real time by the Chinese real estate tycoon Wang Shi, who was there among the spectators in Boston. Now, Wang, with more than 9 million followers on the popular microblog Sina Weibo, describes the smoke and the sound of the blasts. And his Weibo post and photo were shared more than 5,000 times. Now, Chinese media is also circulating a photo of a Chinese student injured in the bomb attack, as seen here, the top story in the South China Morning Post. Now, the state-run Xinhua news agency reports that a female overseas student from China was injured and in a coma. She is a student at Boston University. Christy Liu Stout, CNN, Hong Kong.
I'm Nick Payton-Walsh in Beirut, and while many expatriates and Lebanese were watching the images from Boston with great horror, this is of course a city with a deep empathy for that kind of violence, having been struck in its very centre just months ago by a very similar type of blast. Of course, this is a region where such violence is a daily regularity. Iraq itself hit by dozens of blasts and dead on Monday alone. So many here will be concerned at any possible claim of responsibility for the Boston attack and the repercussions that could have across the region.
I'm Fred Pleitgen in Berlin, Germany. 250 runners from Germany participated in the Boston Marathon, and so therefore, of course, the bombings are a topic in this country as well.